Hello flosstube. It's AM Dreamingstitcher here to bring you my monthly update, and also after I show you my stitching I thought I might go into a little explanation of why I don't offer the extras that some other flosstubers do. Not that I'm not interested in some of what they have to say, but I don't think you would be interested if I did the same things, and I'll explain that at the end. Anyway, I haven't done a whole lot of stitching this month. I believe I've only worked on 3 projects, so I'm going to show you those kind of quickly. The one that got a lot of attention early in the month was my carousel horse from Bernat, which I have shown you several times. And the horse itself is now done, other than the little bit of back stitching that she has. And I've made some progress on the borders. And had I continued her, she might have been done by the end of June. But I kind of took a break from her. It happens. And she is coming along, and she's so far along that I'm not even going to bother to try to show you the picture of the finished product. But she will have some lazy daisies and back stitching and the occasional French knot added to her cross stitching when she's through. Another project that I worked on was my heartstring samplery, His Eye is on the Sparrow, and I didn't do a whole lot with that either. Less than I did on the horse, I think, but I can show you how it's coming. There are so many flosstubers doing this project, I don't think I'll show you what it looks like finished either. But what I did was a little bit on the border down there, and I finished that bird that was giving me trouble before, and I did the deer. And I think that's it. So it's coming along. It is what it is. But I haven't done too much with it. Not because I wasn't interested, I was very interested. And I took it with me on a trip to see my sister. And I did some of that while at her house. But I thought it might be a nice opportunity. I knew that we were going to do a little bit of traveling when I went to see her, to bring what you all refer to as a car project. I've never done a car project before. I wasn't sure what it would be like to actually try to stitch in the car, but since it was an opportunity for me not to be driving, I thought I would give it a shot and see, whether it's actually feasible. Most of the time I have no one to drive me anywhere, so a car project would not be practical. But I took a small start with me. And the first day that I was at my sister's, we planned to go to a town that was about an hour and 45 minutes away. So I started to pack up my stitching to bring in the car, and my sister objected. She said I was there to visit, and that stitching in the car was not visiting. So I said, okay, I just wanted to see if it was doable, because I know we're taking another trip in a couple of days that's going to be a long one. But alright, I'll leave it at home. So the day after that, we were taking another trip that was an hour and a half to our destination. This is each way, by the way, so that day that it was an hour and 45 minutes, that was each way. I knew not to try to bring it on the day that we were doing an hour and a half drive, because she wouldn't let me do it the day before. But the day that we were taking a drive that was going to be, well, let's just say we left around 8 in the morning and got back around 1 in the morning. It was a lot of driving. It's a lot of driving. So I had the kit then, and the kit that I brought was this, and I assured my sister that I could still visit with her and stitch at the same time. I even made them stop at one point so that I could get some antiseptic wipes to keep my hands clean in the car so that I could stitch. But the kit I brought was this one, My First Stitch. And I got this one off of eBay. I saw it in another flosstuber's stash parade, I guess you could call it. It was one of 2 stitchers, I don't recall which. It was either the stitcher who has the stash she stole, and no, she didn't really steal it, but she calls it the stash she stole, and she was going through things. She may have showed this, or it could have been Colbin. I don't remember which one it was, but I know I looked at them show all kinds of things, and one of them had this, and I'd been looking for something with mushrooms or toadstools, and I thought that looks really cute. So I went online and found it at eBay and purchased it, and that's the one I took for my car project. And this is how far I am so far with that one. But there is a story that goes with it. So I hope you'll be patient and listen to my story. And no, it's not the story of how my sister did not want me to stitch the first 2 days of traveling, and I only got to do it on the day that we had so many, many, many hours in the car. But I hated this. Oh my Lord, I hated it. I like the design. Doing a car project, doing this car project, was not a good plan. For one thing, this fabric is the stiffest stuff I have ever worked with in my life, and that includes that really horrible MCG textile stuff that I showed you, that I stitched the tribal rhino on. I tend to hold small projects in hand. This one has a permanent crease in it that's going to have to be ironed out just for me folding it over to hold in hand. This stuff is so stiff. There is no give at all in this fabric when you try to put your needle through. Good luck. It does not yield. And so, like some stitchers, I'm finding it's a little bit of a chore to be stitching. Oh, and this floss knots up like anything. I got a knot just now, and I didn't do anything except try to run that through. And I've got a knot. Anyway, I was just going to say, you got to push. I think I need a thimble. It's putting dents in my finger stitching with this because it is so darn stiff. Every stitch is work. Okay, that's one reason I hate it. I'm okay stitching it now. It's still bad, but it was not a good car project. Why was it not a good car project? Well, at one point, I think my sister asked how the stitching was coming, and I tried very diplomatically to say that, without actually coming out and saying it, that something about that trip was making me car sick. I don't remember what I actually said, but she responded that it was her husband's driving, and he said it was the fact that they'd been told to get new shocks, and the new shocks cost a fortune, and so they hadn't. So here's what was going on while I'm trying to stitch. I'm trying to put my needle in as we drive down the road. And the car's constantly moving. He's one of those drivers that's doing this all the time. And I'm sitting in the back seat the whole time, which puts you in a different position to the wheel well, so sometimes you know that's going to cause the car to sway a bit. So his constant, that was making me sick. And the fact that the shocks were bad. So we were driving on highways pretty much the whole time, and I had to brace myself in the car. There was no sitting there and neatly, carefully stitching. There was, okay, hold still so that I can put this needle in the hole and pull it through, and it's going to hurt my finger. Now hold still so that I can put my next needle in the hole. Oh, it was horrible. And this leaf up here is all funky at the top. That's my souvenir of trying to stitch on the way back before the sun set, and it didn't go through the hole right because I was losing the light and the car was swaying, and I didn't notice till later. And I could probably take that whole leaf out, but I think that's my trip souvenir of you can't stitch when your car's sick, folks. You just can't. Never going to do that again. I hated the kit. I thought I never should have bought it. This is a nightmare. I am miserable. It's all I got done in the car. And I told you, we left at 8 in the morning and didn't get back till 1 in the morning. So it was a long day. That we spent at least 11 hours driving altogether. 11 or 12 or more. I don't know. It was a long drive. A long drive. Let's see. Yeah, it was a long drive. Anyway, all I got done, I think, were these 2 bottom green leaves, a little bit of the red edge, not all of it, but some of the red edge, and maybe 2 white spots. In 11 hours. 2 leaves, some edge, and a couple of spots. At least 11 hours. Of course, I wasn't trying to stitch the whole time, but oh, it was awful. It was awful. So that's my stitch. And obviously, once I got home and picked it up again, home meaning her house too, it was not so bad. It's still, the fabric's still awful. The knots are still awful. But I'll get that done. It's not so bad when you're not in a car that's making you car sick. Okay, so that was my stitching for the month. What else do I have for you? Well, this would have been an incredibly short video, and if I have as little as this in the future, I'll just stop there and tell you that's all I've got. But I do have a couple of stitchy related things, and then I thought I'd explain to you why I don't do like some of the other floss tubers do, and show you things like, here's what I've been reading. Here's what I've been listening to. I noticed that Kyle Reckemeier's starting to do that. You guys wouldn't be interested, and I'm going to prove it to you today. But I'm going to start with one piece of stitchy related acquisition that you might be interested in. So don't go away if you like stitchy books. I got Flower Portraits in Cross Stitch by Taya Gouveneur. Bought it used, third-party sellers on Amazon. And just to show you a little bit of what it's like, a lot of pages have charts, so I can't show you, but she'll have a photograph of an actual flower and then her stitched design, and then of course a chart. And it's full of flowers, lots of different flowers. I don't know that they're in any particular or reasonable order that I can tell, but here's your table of contents with a few more samples. Oh, they're in color order. White flowers, yellow and orange flowers, red flowers, pink flowers, purple flowers, blue flowers. Lots of flowers. You get a lot of flowers in your book. And they're all very similar to what you see there. Well, some of those are photographs, but the stitched ones. Little stitched motifs, I guess you could say, like the one on the cover. Let's find you another one that doesn't have a chart, just because. Photograph, stitch design. So if you're a flower lover, this might be the book for you. Here's a rose. Rose photograph. Stitch design. Okay, seems like a nice book. I got it at a pretty reasonable price. Flowers in Cross Stitch by Taya Gouveneur. Now, some floss tubers go on to share other things like their reading, and I did just finish one book that might be of interest to stitchers. So let me show you that one. I tend to be reading several books at a time. The book I've been reading most lately is my sister's novel that she's working on, which is, I don't know, I've been reading it on the iPad. The way it formats, there's no telling, but it's at least, if it were published, at least 700 pages. And she's aware that agents and publishers are not looking for first novels that are that many pages, but that's been taking up a lot of my time. Anyway, besides that, some of the things I've been reading, I just finished this one. A Stitch in Time, The Needlework of Aging Women in Antebellum America. And I think some floss tubers actually might be interested in books like this. It was not as interesting as I hoped it would be. It is from a university press by a historian, so she's more interested in pointing out the holes in history scholarship, like other authors investigated this aspect of stitching, but really there's a whole avenue of stitching open here that they could look into. A lot of history stuff. Her prose is pretty dry, follows kind of the same pattern. She'll introduce an object and then the person who stitched it, and then give you biographical information on that person. Usually they were born here, the child of this person in this year. She seldom knows a whole lot more about them, even though some of them left diaries and things. To show you that it is a history book, the actual text, you read to here, and all the rest of the book is appendices, notes, bibliography, charts. It's a history book, okay? But I thought it was kind of interesting, and she started dealing both with cross stitch and quilts. There's a lot on quilts, and I'm not a quilter, so that part was a little less interesting to me. really overall I was a little disappointed it wasn't quite what I thought it would be. But I did learn some things. She did deal with some samplers. I found it interesting that she talked about, as it says, antebellum America, so prior to the Civil War, first part of the 19th century. She dealt a lot with what they might have called a decline in needlework standards. She said one reason for the older women to stitch was to pass on skills to the younger generation, or to show them the skills that were being lost, and to do in older styles that they thought still had value, and so on. So one of the stitchers in here redid her childhood sampler when she was an aging adult, in part probably to teach her grandchild, but the grandchild was allowed to do her model on fabric that had, by that time they were printing it with blue lines to help you count the stitching, just like some of the gridded fabric that you can get for cross stitch these days. They had fabric that was pre-lined, and here's one of those. I don't know if you can tell from the light, but there are pale blue lines running through that fabric that help the stitcher. Anyway, that one I read. You might be interested in that one. What else am I reading? Why don't I show you my books? Well, I got 3 more here. I'm sure I've got more lying around that are part of what I'm reading right now. This one, actually, with all those stitchers who are doing things like their Salem Sal and their interest in all things witchy, maybe they would actually like this. I don't know. It's called Entertaining Satan by John Putnam Demos. I think I've had this so darn long that he actually has a revised edition out now, so it must have been a pretty well-respected book. The subtitle is Witchcraft and the Culture of Early New England, and he's divided it into basically 3 parts. The first is biographical, where he takes cases of a couple of individuals accused of witchcraft and details everything he can about their lives and the accusations and the outcomes. Then his next section is about the culture, I believe. He has one on the psychology and one on the culture. Let's see. If I look at his table of contents, that'll make more sense. The second section is on psychology, and the third is on the sociology or culture that led to it. Oh, and he has a 4th one on history. Anyway, I'm still in the first one. I haven't got that far, but he's chunking it, breaking his book into those sections. So I read about his first accused witch, which was a lady named Rachel, who had, oh my goodness, what a miserable life. She married very late in life and chose the wrong person. She was supposed to get an inheritance from her father that her brother-in-law made sure she never got. She had to rely on handouts from the town. She had a poor temperament because of all that, and said ugly things that made people accuse her of witchcraft. I mean, poor Rachel. She had a miserable life. And the second chapter is about a gentleman named John Godfrey, so we have a male witch, who, even after accusations of witchcraft and being acquitted of those, people in the town would continue to employ him for things like being a cowherd or a shepherd, a handyman. And the author found that kind of intriguing, that you could continue living on in your community as long as, you know, you were acquitted. But I haven't finished the section on him, so I don't know quite what happens to him next. But I am finding this one interesting. Maybe flosstubers who are into Salem and witches and everything would actually like that. I don't know. I'm not very far into it yet. What page am I on? 43. See, I haven't got very far at all. But I've had the book a long time, and I decided it was time to read it. What else am I reading? Well, maybe there are flosstubers who would like something like this. I got this last month. I've got a large library. Most of these books are actually available, I'm sure, online at places like Project Gutenberg. But this was just really tempting. I looked at the table of contents. I don't have about anything by Jules Verne. I'm familiar with his work. I mean, it's been made into movies and things so many times, but I don't actually have a collection of Jules Verne's works. So there's a list of the stories that are in here, and I started way in there with Around the World in 80 Days. And when you're dealing with an author like this who wrote originally in another language and they're putting it into English, one of the big obstacles to overcome is how well the translator does. And I don't know who their translators were for these, but I'm really enjoying Around the World in 80 Days. I'm enjoying the translation into English. I don't know how it compares to the French, but it doesn't seem at all awkward. I'm finding it quite entertaining. I'm sorry. I'm laughing at this. Phileas Fogg is a very deadpan, straight-laced, methodical, mechanical kind of individual. But Jules Verne obviously was not. So here we have Phileas Fogg being offered up a dinner at the railway station, and the landlord especially recommended a certain giblet of native rabbit on which he prided himself. Mr. Fogg accordingly tasted the dish, but despite its spiced sauce, found it far from palatable. He rang for the landlord, and on his appearance said, fixing his clear eyes upon him, "Is this rabbit, sir?" "Yes, my lord," the rogue boldly replied. "Rabbit from the jungles." "And this rabbit did not mew when he was killed?" "Mew? My lord, what, a rabbit mew? I swear to you." "Be so good, landlord, as not to swear, but remember this. Cats were formerly considered in India as sacred animals. That was a good time. For the cats, my lord? Perhaps for the travellers as well." I'm sorry, but I find that funny. I just happened to open to that one at random. But yeah, he served him cat and told him it was rabbit, and he could tell the difference and was very straight-laced about it. I don't know. It entertains me. Maybe you would like Jules Verne too. I don't know. What else am I reading? I just got this one. One of the places we went in our day tripping was a little museum that had a bookshop, and in the bookshop they had a copy of this, and it was beyond my price point, but it was the first time I actually heard of it. Dinofist International, Proceedings of a Symposium sponsored by Arizona State University back in 1997. And I picked it up and looked at it and thought, that looks awesome. I mean, just the names of the articles send me tingling. Is it out of date? Oh my lord, yes, it's 21 years old now. But this is my cup of tea, folks. And I haven't read very far yet, other than thoroughly enjoying what's in there. Oh, where did I get it? Since I didn't get it at the museum, I came home and ordered it online. I felt a little bad about not buying it from the museum people, but as I said, their copy was above my price point, and we did pay for admission to their little museum. It was a little town museum that they had. So they got their admission money, and I went home and ordered this book online. And all I've read so far is the first article and the introduction, I believe. But the first article that I'm on is by one of my favorites, Edwin H. Colbert. And his article is telling you about the changing views of dinosaurs over time, how they were seen by different scientists and the public over the years. And he has a long list of some of the ways they were seen, and then he proceeds to explain that to you. Why is he my favorite? Well, hang on just a moment. Edwin H. Colbert published all kinds of books on dinosaurs and early creatures. I only have his Little Dinosaurs of Ghost Ranch, which is about his discoveries of Coelophysis fossils in New Mexico. But I've had this since, I think, high school. It was gifted to me. This is an autobiographical book of his, and I asked for it specially. His books were in the school libraries when I was growing up. He was a curator emeritus at Northern Arizona University, where we went once because my sister was going to school there, and we stopped at the Museum of Northern Arizona, and I was so tempted to ask them if he was available to just talk to, and I thought, he doesn't need some complete stranger fawning on him. I don't go fangirl, folks. I'm not interested in celebrities. None of that seems to have any impact on me. But, oh, I would have liked to talk to him, so I guess I'm a paleontologist fangirl. What he had to say in his DinoFest International, I haven't finished his little article yet. As I said, I read the preface and started this. When he's talking about dinosaurs as large terrestrial quadrupeds, he mentions Sir Richard Owen, a controversial figure in the history of vertebrate anatomy and paleontology, was nonetheless a very perceptive anatomist. And I thought, controversial. I remember he's very famous for his anatomy skills. Controversial how? Wait a minute. Was he the one? And I recalled this other book that I read some time ago by Deborah Cadbury The First Dinosaur Hunters and the Birth of a New Science. She talks about some folks like Mary Anning, the poor girl who discovered fossils along the seacoast in England and sold them for the rest of her life, things like ichthyosaur fossils and ammonites and all of those. But a lot of this is about the rivalry between Sir Richard Owen, the famous anatomist, and poor Gideon Mantell, who discovered things like the iguanodon tooth, and was just a country doctor. But Richard Owen was horrible to him. Oh my Lord. Horrible. This, I think, is why Mr. Colbert says he was a controversial figure. Brilliant man, Richard Owen. But backstabbing, manipulative, evil might be too strong a word, but oh, not a nice guy. Not a nice guy. So yeah, that's why he said that. Anyway, I'm totally excited about this. What else did I get on that trip? Well, I haven't started reading them yet, but I got a book about Carlsbad Caverns, about the photography and how it's been represented in art and so on. I got, did I pick up any other books? Picked up a chart of life through time. I don't know. But anyway, those are not the only books I'm reading at the moment, probably. If I looked around, I'm sure I could find another. In fact, oh, one moment. So I just thought of another one I started today. Like, reading 4 books at once was not enough, that other flosstubers might appreciate. I get books from the Library of America series. This is American Fantastic Tales. This particular volume is Poe to the Pulps. They're not fantastic in the terms of fantasy. It's more like horror. They were selected by and introduced by Peter Straub, who was an American horror writer. And I've only read the first so far this morning by Charles Brockden Brown, but it's pretty much a chronological set of stories by early fantasy and horror writers. So there's a table of contents for you. Probably too tiny for you all to see, but some of the authors. And it does work its way in this volume up to such luminaries as H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard of Conan fame, more respected literary authors like Henry James and Edith Wharton and Willa Cather, some that just seem to show up a lot in anthologies of this type like Lufcadi O'Hearn, just a whole lot of different folks. Anyway, I did start that one this morning, and maybe some of you flosstubers would like that, I don't know. And another one, yeah, I read too many books at once. I went to the Friends of the Library, got a couple of books at the Friends of the Library. This is an old literature textbook from 1969. And why do I get things like that? I have plenty of access to these stories elsewhere. I like to see what they collected for their readers then. This one would have been for senior year in high school, I believe. And it's in beautiful condition. I just barely started it, but these kinds of things change over time. What do they think is of value for our young learners? I get this almost as much for that as for actually reading the contents. Because there are things in here like The Turn of the Screw. I've got copies of The Turn of the Screw. I don't need this thing to read The Turn of the Screw. The Open Boat, I know that's anthologized all over the place. But their Life on the Mississippi, I have the whole thing. But All Gold Canyon, I am not familiar with that. You know, I'll be introduced occasionally. The Moral Equivalent of War. I don't know if I have that one. I do have some things by William James. But it's just interesting to see what do they put together, and in the case of this one, they have a whole set of study questions in the back. What kind of questions do they feel appropriate for learners in 1969? What is the proportion, for example, of female authors to male authors? I can tell you there aren't very many in here. How would it be different? Or minority writers? How does that differ from what you would see in an anthology today? And I do have a few more modern anthologies. So I get things like this kind of... I once said I sometimes watch flosstubers for the wrong reasons. I sometimes read books for what the literary critics might consider the wrong reasons. I want to know about this because I want to know what they were teaching then and how it's changed. And yes, the contents are interesting too. and this I felt completely ignorant about this, I have, from the Library of America series, an entire volume by Jonathan Edwards, who was known for the Great Awakening in the 18th century in America, and his writings on that. And they have a little excerpt from something that he wrote that I don't believe is in that anthology. I couldn't find it, that I never heard of, and apparently my more religious viewers will say, well, of course we've heard of that. His resolutions. And they don't have all of them. Apparently he wrote 70, because you can find them online, and they've sort of excerpted them and given, you know, some of them. They're skipping around, like they go from 16 to 24. But, you know, what questions do they put with those? What did they cut out when they have the little dot, dot, dots, the little ellipsis? What else did his resolutions say that isn't there? I didn't even know he had written these. So they sometimes anthologize things that they wouldn't anymore. And is that because they're more sensitive to religion in schools? Is that why they use different excerpts of his? I don't know. Life was different in 1969. Okay, the other thing that some flosstubers do is talk about what they're listening to. So you've seen some of the weird stuff I'm reading. I don't know how many flosstubers would actually be interested in any of that. A lot of you have done things like the Know Your Needleworker tag. I don't think when you talked about the music you liked, too many people liked what I like. So what did I listen to in the 6 hours, 7 hours it took me to get to my sister's house? I had 7 hours to pop something in the car, and on the way back I made fewer stops. I got done in 6.5. I could have put anything on. What did I put on to listen to? The Great Courses, How to Listen to and Understand Great Music, 3rd edition. I've had this for a while. Who knows how many editions they're on now? Probably a lot more than the 3rd edition. This is copyright 2006. And I had listened to a little bit of it before and just never got around to it. Well, 6 hours is a good long time, 7 hours to be listening. So I learned more about some of the composers that I have in my collection, the difference between regular plain chant and gentlemen who came along later like Léonine and Perrotine. I have some of their recordings, or Guillaume de Michaud or Palestrina. He talked about those folks, and now I get a better idea of what they were doing with their music. It was actually very illuminating, and the whole time I was listening to him I was thinking, when I get home I've got to pop those discs in and see if I can hear what he was talking about. And he worked his way up just to the beginning of the Baroque, basically. I only got to one of the discs in part 2. There are 8 discs in here, by the way, and probably another 8 in this. And I didn't listen much on the way home, so I only got to one of these. But yeah, that's what I put in to listen to. What did I most recently have in my actual CD player at home? Well, this is the one sitting on top. Mercury Living Presence, Antal Dorati. Whole bunch of Viennese waltzes. Why is that in there? Because I was working my way through this set that I bought a year before last, I think. Mercury Living Presence. Yeah, everybody else has given up on CDs, I'm sure. That's why these were so darn cheap. Yeah, I'm working my way through. I bought a whole bunch of sets around the same time. I don't think there's too many flosstubers listening to Viennese waltzes right now. Kyle Reckemeyer, you don't watch mine. You like to listen to old stuff from the 70s. I don't think you'd listen to this, though. It was recorded in 1958, 1956, and 1957. Is that a little before your time? Yeah. So, this is why the next time I don't have much to show, I'm just not going to show much, because I know that FlossTube is not going to be terribly interested in what I'm reading or what I'm listening to or any of that. And I do like it sometimes when other FlossTubers talk about those, but I don't think you really need me sharing it. The most contemporary, likely to be interesting to FlossTube thing that I have is I just got Jim Butcher's Briefcases, which is a collection of his Harry Dresden short stories. Haven't had a chance to read it yet. With all the ones I'm already reading, probably have to put it off a little longer. But yeah, maybe some floss tubers would be interested in that. I don't know. Floss tubers like a lot of different things. Anyway, that's it for me today. I showed you what I had that I was stitching. Do I have other stitching acquisitions? Yes. We won't talk about those. I spent more money. I'm going to try to stop doing that, spending the money. When my sister saw this, she thought it was hilarious. The live simply. Her definition of live simply is not to be endlessly buying patterns and charts and books and such. And I agree with her. That is one definition of living simply. But I think it means more than that. Something different to different people. And I'm not really going to go into that philosophy today, but I'm going to try to live up to that motto. Maybe not in spending habits, but I am going to try to. My new motto, if anyone sees a chart with this, please tell me. That's what I would look for, is be satisfied. I want to try to be satisfied. So I've got all these beautiful things to stitch already. Be satisfied. Stop looking for the newest, prettiest, interesting thing. I've got so many books. I went to the Friends of the Library again. They were having a half-price sale. I came home with 6 books. I don't have room to put them anywhere. I was trying to rearrange bookcases to figure out where they could go. Some of them are really good. Just a couple of them sitting here. What did I get? I thought this looked really interesting. I have 3 nonfiction children's books on clocks because I thought it was an interesting topic. And in children's nonfiction, they often simplify it for the reader so that for someone who's completely unknowledgeable about it, as I am, a children's book is a nice way to approach the subject. And they were interesting, and they were older, and they sort of covered the history of it. But here, I actually found an adult book on the subject, and that's going to give me more of the depth that none of those children's books could do. I thought that was fascinating. Half price meant I paid $1 for it. And another thing I got there was for 25 cents. This had the least favorable reviews of any of the ones I picked up. As Seen on TV, the visual culture of everyday life in the 1950s. For 25 cents, I'm sure that will entertain me. The other books were art books, and one about the Smithsonian. And yeah, won't go there. So I need to be satisfied and stop shopping. I need to be satisfied and stop looking for more books and more kits and more everything. Be satisfied, folks. If you see a chart that says that, or if you want to design a chart that says that and tell me about it, for flosstube designers out there, let me know. That's the motto I need. Live simply is fine. I need to be satisfied. So thank you very much for watching. Any other videos in the future, I will not make you sit through all that extra stuff. That was just kind of a, here's why I don't do it, because I'm out there. I'm a little weird. No, weird's not the word. Atypical. Atypical. I don't consider myself weird because even for things like this, even if there are no other floss tubers who get totally excited reading the papers in here, oh my gosh, they're just observations of microstructures within dinosaur eggs from Henan province. Dinosaurs and dirt on the Cretaceous extinction of the Ammonites. Okay, so maybe you don't get excited by that stuff. But somebody held this symposium. Somebody wrote all these papers. Somebody published these papers. Somebody printed these and thought they were for sale. That means there's nothing weird about liking this. Atypical, yeah. Atypical. But not weird. I always tell myself that about any of the strange things I have. My sister thinks I'm idiosyncratic. Yeah, I might be idiosyncratic, but there's nothing weird about it. It's just atypical. Anyway, thank you for watching and suffering through this, and I will show you more stitching next time, I promise. And this video is what it is, so I'll watch and make sure it worked, but I'm not going to bother not publishing it even if it rambled, because it's me, folks. It is what it is. Thank you. I hope you watch again sometime in the future. I hope to have more stitching to show you sometime soon. And I really want to work on my his eyes on the sparrow. I want to work on all of them. I love them all. That's what I've been telling myself when the new bug starts twitching. I say, you're going to take pleasure in every one of these when you're stitching it. You don't need to jump ahead. You're going to take pleasure in what you're doing. I really want to do some more on his eyes on the sparrow. I want to do those next couple of motifs. You will take pleasure when you do them. Starting something new will have its own pleasure, but you're going to enjoy what you're doing. Do it. Be satisfied. Bye-bye, flosstube.